Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Barclays Eagle Lab webinar that we're running this afternoon. It's great to have you with us. My name's Luke. I work within Eagle Labs as an ecosystem manager down on the South Coast. So I'm sat here in Southampton today out of one of our 43 labs that are based around the country. Super excited to be joined today by Elena Connolly, founder of 23 Wise Words, to share with us some useful tips about how you can make brand voice your startup's secret weapon. But before we get started, I just wanted to take this opportunity to give Eagle Labs and our proposition around supporting businesses a bit of a plug, just to tell you a bit more about that. So Eagle Labs is all about making connections and providing learning opportunities for businesses that are ambitious to help them grow. And we have a whole bunch of support available through Eagle Labs, which you can register for. Most recently, we've launched our Eagle Labs community platform, and the URL to that, labs.uk.barclays/community, is a really great place to sort of log in, create your own profile, and ultimately get access to all sorts of support from us. It's all free to access, and you don't have to bank with Barclays, so it really is an open door to anyone looking to learn more. We have accelerator programs that we run nationally. We also run programs to help scaling companies. We've got a whole roster of mentors, both business and technical mentors, that you can plug into and get some hours with. And we also have investor connectivity platform called Demo Directory. So if you're looking to gain funding for your business, we have a platform there that really gives you a showcase, essentially, to gain that funding that you need. So I now have to just read a short disclaimer before I pass the microphone over to Elle to take on the session. So let me just read that out for you. So we've asked Elle to join us today to provide some tips and tricks around how to make your brand voice your startup secret weapon. The topics discussed are an overview of options for you to think about to help you with your independent research and business decisions. They're not intended as recommendations or advice. Remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances. The statements and views expressed may not be applicable or suitable for your business. If you found yourself on YouTube, if you found yourself joining us via YouTube, you can find a link to Vvox in the description below to be able to join us in the chat and to post your questions, etc. So please do post questions as we go along, and we'll be addressing those throughout the session and at the end as well. That's enough from me, so I'm going to pass over to you now, Elle, to take it over from there.
Thanks, Luke, and thanks everybody for coming. So today we're going to talk about how to make brand voice your startup's secret weapon. So we don't want to settle for a brand voice that sounds fine. Fine can cost you funding, customers, and credibility. So today you're going to learn how to use your brand voice so your messaging becomes impossible for investors and customers to ignore. The main thing I want you to take away from today is just that there's so much more to brand voice than you are probably aware of. I think a lot of people have the misconception that brand voice is just about tone and personality. And hopefully you're going to learn today that actually there's a whole lot more to it, and it can be so important for your business and for the growth of your business. So I'm excited to share that how it can actually bring in revenue for you. So I really want this to be an interactive session. So I want you to ask questions. I've kept the presentation side deliberately quite short, so there's lots of space at the end to ask questions and to talk through your copy and brand challenges. And also there's some time in between the slides where I'll stop and ask if you have any questions as well. So please use the chat function. I'll keep an eye on it. Luke's keeping an eye on it. And I'd really love to help you get more value from the session by answering your questions as we go. So let's get started. So in this session, we are going to cover why a fine brand voice is dangerous. So if you've ever described your voice or some copy that you've sent out for your business as fine, we'll talk about why that's dangerous. We'll talk about my Voiceprint method, how to build a voice that brings in revenue. So that's the method that I have developed, which I call my Voiceprint. So as I talk through the presentation, I'll refer to the Voiceprint, and what I'm actually talking about is your brand voice strategy, but the Voiceprint is my specific framework for it. And we'll also cover using your brand voice to nail your AI content strategy. So it's almost impossible to talk about copy and brand voice without talking about AI right now. We're all thinking about using it. We're possibly using it. 90% of us aren't getting the output that we want from it. So we're going to talk about how nailing your brand voice can really, really elevate your AI content strategy if that is on the cards for your business. So just before we get into it, I just want to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about me and my expertise. So I'm Elle. I am the founder of 23 Wise Words. So I'm a copywriter and a brand voice strategist with a background in psychology. I actually studied PR and psychology at university. Everyone was kind of like, what are you going to do with those 2 degrees? And after uni, I kind of parked the psychology side as an interest. And I was kind of like, okay, it's not going to be a career. Spent many years in creative agencies, copywriting, project managing, event production, all that good stuff. And then started my copywriting and brand strategy business about 9 years ago, which is when I realized how much psychology is actually involved, particularly in the copywriting side. So I was very pleased that I got to prove everyone wrong and kind of say, right, oh, I have used psychology and PR in my career. And so I do now combine the 2. So everything I do, my whole methodology is all backed in psychology and those behavioral sciences and persuasion principles and copywriting formulas. So very, very science backed. So I started teaching people how to write their own copy, particularly business owners, founders, solopreneurs. And I've taught over 25,000 people how to write words that convert through online courses. And spent many years helping startups, writing for startups where, as we know, every word counts. And now I help founders and marketing teams develop a brand voice that brings in revenue. And I also help founders and startups and fast-growing teams train their AI how to sound like their brand and think like a copywriter. So there's lots of kind of different layers to it. I always say if you can teach humans how to write copy, which I have done for many years, you can definitely teach AI. It's just that nobody's kind of putting in that background work to actually do it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. You can find out more about me at 23wisewords.com, 23 Wise Words on YouTube. So yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody who is interested. All right, so before we get started, I just want to get a gauge of the room. So put a thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat if anyone here already has a defined brand voice. So it could be that you did your brand voice right when you started your business. Lots of businesses do this. They kind of get really excited about the brand work and they're maybe just starting out and developing the product or the service, and they do all this brand work and then it kind of gets parked in a long lost Google folder, never to be seen again, and resurrected maybe a few years later. So if you have got a brand voice, is that the case for you? Or maybe you've waited and you haven't actually got anything developed yet. I'd love to know if anyone put thumbs up or thumbs down if you have a brand voice, and maybe we can come back to that and decide and work out how many people do and don't, because it would be really great to know. All right. So startup and scale up challenges. So give me another thumbs up if any of these hit home for you. So these are challenges that I come across all the time when I'm talking to founders, particularly with startups and small marketing teams. So you worry that if your logo disappeared, or that no one would be able to tell your brand apart from competitors. So this is a really interesting phenomenon which is kind of evolved over the past few years. And I saw a really interesting chat about this on LinkedIn not long ago, where a lot of particularly SaaS and tech businesses, the tone of voice have all kind of merged into this one very similar sounding tone. It's very conversational. It's very simple language. You'll know exactly the one I mean if they're thinking of, say, Monday.com or Dropbox, that their tone of voice, everybody kind of has started sounding very similar. So maybe you find that for your startup as well. You might find that your website pages, your landing pages look great, but they're not actually converting. So you feel like you know your ICP really well. You feel like you've done all this work on knowing who you're talking to and what their problems are and the solutions that you can find for them, but you actually aren't getting those conversions through. And that could be because although you know your ICP, you're not actually talking like them, you're not reflecting them in your brand voice. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. And the third challenge could be, and I see this is probably the most common challenge, is that your pitch deck sounds corporate, your LinkedIn sounds casual, and your AI content sounds beige. And it's really frustrating. Everything seems to sound different, and you can't seem to get that consistency across everything you post. So the trouble with a lot of brand voice strategies is that they hook to adjectives. So we're warm, but we're not this, or we're quirky, but we're not sarcastic. So we list adjectives and we try and hook the brand voice around that. And the problem there is that they're very, very subjective. So if one person thinks a warm tone of voice in your writing team and is writing warm, and then another person has interpreted it a different way, that's how the inconsistency comes in. So I'm going to talk as well about how we can help make your content a little bit more consistent, particularly as you grow. So a sharp brand voice cuts through all three of these. It gives you differentiation, it gives you consistency, and it can give you conversions. And that's how it becomes your secret weapon. Do we have anyone? Just have a quick look at the chat. James. Okay. Couple have brand voice. Most have said that you don't. Okay, that's a good start. That means that when you do come to develop your brand voice, you're going to know what to do, what's best practice. Okay, so this is probably a very good first question then. So what is brand voice? So I hinted to this before, is that a lot of people hear brand voice and they instantly think of either a list of adjectives, so we're this, but we're not that, or they can tell me what their brand archetype is. So they say, oh, we're the ruler, or we're the caregiver, or we're the rebel. And that's kind of the long and short of it. That's where the strategy begins and ends. So I want to tell you today about how much more the brand voice can include. So it can include the language you use and avoid, which we know is probably in a lot of brand voice strategies. It can include what you stand for. So those really important brand messages, what you stand up for and stand out for in your industry, really important to weave that into your brand voice strategy. The messages you repeat until you stick, that's so important. I'm going to talk about why repeating messages is so important for building a connection with your customers as well later on. And it also includes the words and phrases your customer use. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So, we've got a question. How do you align brand voice with positioning when your product or market is still evolving? Okay, why don't I park that one and I'll talk through some of the different ways that you can develop a brand voice. And we might come back to that and you might find you've had some clarity as well. And I might ask a bit more about that. So I'll come back to that one. All right. So why is fine dangerous? So has anyone ever described their brand voice as fine? And this includes any copy you send out. So, oh yeah, it's fine. Let's just send it. It's fine. That word fine gets thrown around quite a lot. And describing a brand voice as fine is dangerous for two reasons. So the first one is that fine is often invisible. So what I mean by that is that fine brand voice that people can just kind of scroll past, it sounds fine, it becomes forgettable and it becomes undistinguishable. So going back to that point we talked about earlier about how if you took your logo away, no one can tell who you are and if it's you or a competitor talking. And that's, you lose sales by default because you're not coming to mind when one of your potential customers needs what you're selling. Or they may be out looking for a solution and they're scrolling past because the brand voice doesn't stand out to them. So it's invisible. The other way that fine tends to manifest is through inconsistency. So we've just talked about that as well. So inconsistency is probably even more dangerous than being invisible, actually. So if you're inconsistent, you can cause confusion, you can be seen as untrustworthy, and then you lose sales by default as well. So we're not here to settle for fine. Forrester actually found that brand consistency can increase revenue by 23%. So there is a direct link to brand consistency and brand voice and actually an increase in revenue. That's what I really love about brand voice, is that it's actually measurable. A lot of brand strategy, which is probably why it gets done and then parked in a Google folder, it's hard to measure the ROI on it. Whereas brand voice, you really can. If you've got this really powerful brand voice and you're weaving it into your copy, you can directly see how that's affecting conversion. So that's why I get really excited about talking about brand voice and how important it is. Okay, so I just want to talk you through my Voiceprint method. So as I said earlier, whenever I'm referring to Voiceprint, that's my proprietary framework for creating a brand voice. So I'm talking about your brand voice strategy, but I will refer to it as the Voiceprint. So the Voiceprint is how we move away from fine. So this is the psychology-driven framework that I use with my clients in order to help them build a brand voice that does bring in revenue. So there's 3 layers to it. So the first layer is empathy, and this is customer insight. This is reflecting how your customers or clients, I'll say customers, but I know some people refer to clients or customers, but same thing. This is weaving in how your customers talk into how you talk, and it closes an empathy gap. And I'm going to talk about that next. The second layer is about identity. So this is how we keep consistency as you grow. It can be very hard to keep a hold of that brand voice and keep it sounding the same when there's lots of different people in the team. So I'm going to talk about how you can try and do that. And the third layer, which for me is really the gold dust, is the influence layer. So this is the behavioral science. This is the persuasion principles, the sales psychology, all the stuff that we can layer into the brand voice, into your copy, in order to make it bring in revenue and actually measure that revenue as well. I'm going to skip on. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to. How do you maintain a consistent brand voice as the team grows and more people start? Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to cover now. It's difficult, but having a defined, really great brand voice, and my Voiceprint method actually does that. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So if you feel like you need more on that, we can come back to it at the end as well, and I'll talk a bit more about it. Okay, so the first layer of your Voiceprint is closing the empathy gap. This is the part that almost everybody skips. If you have a brand voice strategy defined, or you start working with a brand strategist and you start doing your voice, I guarantee this is the part that you won't probably do. So it's the first process in copywriting, in any copywriting project. So we do what we call voice of customer research, but it actually works as well, really well, for brand voice strategy, for creating your Voiceprint. So your Voiceprint should reflect your customer's language back to them. Okay, you need to be talking their language, in other words. So there's 2 behavioral science principles that apply to this solution. So the first one is mirroring, which you might be aware of is an NLP technique. I don't know if anyone is aware of NLP. So you're often told to mirror a person's body language back to them in order to build trust and connection. We're doing the same thing here, but with words. So we want to mirror what your customers are saying back to them in our copy in order to build that trust and build that connection with them. And the other principle that applies is the familiarity principle, which is very hard to say. So we like and trust what we are more familiar with. And that goes for everything. It's people, it's places, it's food. If we're more familiar with it, we tend to like it more. So if we're using words that your customer, your reader is more familiar with, they're more likely to like it, to like your brand, and we buy from brands we like. So it's really, really important to be weaving in that customer language, those customer words, in order to close the empathy gap. So how do you do that? You do that through voice mining, or voice of customer research. You may have heard it described as. So what we do is we go through your internal stuff. So you may have sales tickets, you may have sales calls, you may have customer support emails, all that stuff, and also external forums, social media platforms, anywhere where your customers or potential customers are talking about the problems they have that you can solve, the objections they might have to using a solution, the desires they have, like what they want to get out of it, all the places they're talking about that. We collect it all. we categorize it all, and we weave it back into the brand messages and into the language. So I actually have a system which I'm developing and working with clients on. It's kind of a continual voice of customer AI system, where the great thing about voice of customer research is it's never ending. There's always people talking more and more and more. So we can just keep collectively scraping all that information and using it in our brand and in our copy. It can become really powerful. So just to give you a little bit of results there. So I was writing some meta ads for a SaaS business back in July. Their original, the control ad was had a click-through rate of 0.8%, and we increased that to 1.6% by only changing a couple of words in the ad to reflect the words that their customer were using rather than the words they thought they were using. A lot of businesses think they know their customers, think they know the words they use, but in actual fact, they don't. So that's a really powerful way of increasing conversions and mirroring your customer's language back to them. So we have another question. How do you measure whether your brand voice is successfully resonating with your target audience? And are there specific KPIs or its signals indicate your brand voice needs to change? Okay, so 2 questions there. So how do you measure whether your brand voice is successfully resonating with your target audience? So this is, again, going back to what I love about brand voice, is that you can't, if it sits in a PDF, never to be used again. The only way to measure whether your brand voice is resonating is if you lift it out of a PDF, bring it to life and weave it into copy and actually test it out in your copy. It depends where, so the signals I would be looking for, it depends where you are, where your customer is in their journey. So if you're talking to a cold audience, so we're at the top of the funnel, we're looking for things like engagement increases. So clicks, likes on posts, all that stuff that shows that people are scrolling, stopping, nodding, liking. That's where a cold audience, that's where you can see that things are starting to resonate and you can start measuring. If it's a warmer audience and they're saying your email list, we're at the middle of the funnel, then we're looking for click-through rates, you know, that kind of thing, and the more warmer audience signals, so clicking on things, potentially booking calls and that kind of thing. So it does depend where they are in the journey, and it depends whether you've lifted the brand voice strategy out of the PDF and into the real world, into the wild, as I like to say, and you're actually using it. Specific KPIs or signals, so that your brand voice needs to change. It would be that you're not, like I said before, that you're not seeing those conversions on websites, on landing pages, that you feel like you've got everything right. The UX is good, you know who you're talking to, you've done that work to kind of evolve the product. I think the problem or the challenge a lot of startups face is that they do this work too early. So they kind of launch their business and they go, okay, the first thing we've got to do here is get our brand sorted, get our brand strategy in place. And it's often too early and it's all done. And then as the kind of months, as the launch progresses, as they start evolving, things naturally change in the business as you know more about what you do, about the service, about what's working, what's not working. And then the brand stuff almost becomes out of date and kind of just sits there. So I always say to businesses, wait a little bit, just wait until, maybe if you need something to start with, I'm not saying, you know, don't do any work, but keep it very, very light and top level, let it evolve by itself. And you'll naturally get to a point, which is usually about 3 to 5 years in, where you know enough that this is where it's going to start being really powerful if we actually start defining the brand voice and things. So the indication that it needs to change is probably that you did it too early and it's not reflective of where you're at right now, or you're not seeing those conversions. So great question. If you feel like you need more, pop it in the chat and we can come back to it as well. All right, I'll move on from that. So the second layer in your brand voice, in your Voiceprint strategy, is this scalable identity. So if anyone wants to drop thumbs up if you're a founder and your brand voice still sounds like you. And if you nodded to that, does this make it hard to ship content quickly? So anyone want to put a thumbs up just to let me know if that's the case for you. So the challenge I always find is that when businesses start, the founder or the founders are kind of the de facto brand voice. That's just the way it works. You want your business to kind of, it sounds a bit like you. And I see that all the time, where I'll read something that I'm sent over when I'm being briefed, and then I'll speak to the founder on a call, and I'm like, yeah. And they sound really similar. I can kind of see how that's happened. So the voice is very similar, and that's great, but it doesn't scale. Right. And going back to this question we've got, how do you maintain a consistent brand voice? That's where the inconsistency creeps in, right? Because you've now got different people on the team that need to write, and you can't be a bottleneck as the founder kind of checking everything by you. But it ends up either there is a big bottleneck there where you're trying to ship things out and the founder's like, oh no, crossing things out, I wouldn't say that, I don't like how that, it's all very subjective. Or there's no bottleneck, but what's going out is very inconsistent. So the solution I have found, the best way to, so we don't want to lose the founder energy. We don't want to lose that ethos, that kind of fire that the founder had. We still want the uniqueness of the business, which is based on the founder. But the way to scale it without it being one person dependent is to anchor the brand voice to the brand values. So you'll usually find the values do reflect why the founder started the business in the first place. So I find it easier to anchor a brand voice to values than to a person. So it's much easier to benchmark as a whole team when you're anchoring to the values. So I just want to give you some examples of very well-known businesses. Apple tends to be the poster child for every example when it comes to marketing, but they do it so well. So Apple are very minimalist in how they speak. So if you went onto one of their landing pages, if you look at their ads and their designs, very minimal. It's 2-3 word sentences, very, very succinct, very simple language. And that reflects their value. That reflects that they are very simple in the way that they do their packaging, in the way that their product works. So they reflect the value in the voice. Same with Airbnb. Their voice is very, very welcoming. It's very kind of friendly, which I don't like using the word friendly when I talk about brand voice because it's got totally overused. But one of their values is belonging. So they really want to make sure their voice sounds belonging, brings everybody together. And Duolingo, we know that brand is so playful. It's all about the owl and the gamification of the app. So their brand voice is very playful in how they talk as well. So you can kind of see how that makes it a lot easier to scale because you've got this continuity across the brand values and the voice. And it makes it a lot easier for the team to then benchmark how they should be talking. So when your voice follows your values, you can scale while still keeping that uniqueness and that consistency. All right. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop in and I'll come back to it. If not, I just want to move through to my favorite bit. So as a copywriter, I love the behavioral science side of brand strategy, of copywriting. The psychology is often the bit that's missed, and it's so powerful. So influence is the third layer of your voice print. So we've talked about empathy, the customer, you reflecting on the customer voice. We've talked about the identity, which is where you anchor your voice to your values so that you can grow consistently. And then the third layer is the most exciting layer, in my opinion, which is the behavioral science. So this is where we use the brand voice. It can't be a secret weapon if it sits in a PDF. The strategy has no value if it doesn't translate into sales. That's such an important part for fast-growing businesses, for startups. It's all very well having a strategy, but you really do need to see the ROI from your strategy. You need to see those sales when you're in the fast growth stage. So this is where that really helps. So a voice print is wired with the psychology of persuasion, which is where it comes to life. So your voice print would define emotional triggers. So when and where to use triggers like curiosity, like social proof, like urgency, like future pacing. There are so many different psychological triggers that we can weave into your voice print strategy. And this actually looks like, okay, this is the email, our onboarding email sequence. This is where we layer in urgency in email 2. This is where we use future pacing to start email 4. We use in media res in email 6. So there's loads of different ways we can use psychology. And the Voiceprint method actually identifies those for you. It says in headlines, we often use future pacing because we find that. And we can A/B test, but it really does give you a guideline of when to use these psychology tactics and where in your copy. So we also talk about how to use copywriting formulas like PESO, like ADA, and where your specific product or audience, where we should use those copywriting formulas. So you can then see how, when we're so defined by that, we can then pass that around and other people can write the copy. Okay, we use PESO, which stands for problem, aggravation, solution, outcome. So that's a kind of way to start specific copy. So, okay, we use PESO when we're writing the first paragraph of a landing page. And that can then be passed around. If a copywriter's writing for you, if the PR person's stepping in to write something, they have that defined psychology framework. And it really does then make your writing and your brand voice and your brand messages convert so much quicker. So it stops people from scrolling and starts them signing up. Does anyone have any questions about influence? I can come back to that if anyone. There's so much to talk about there. Obviously, I could go on forever. As you've probably guessed, I'm very passionate about this project, about this subject. So yeah, I could talk about it all day. I wanted to keep this kind of nice and short so that we could answer questions. But yeah, I mean, if anyone does want to speak to me about the psychology and the persuasion principles behind brand voice and behind brand messages, I would love to chat. Oh, we have one. Okay. So with the emergence and increased use of AI, how can founders safely use AI tools to maintain a consistent brand voice without sounding generic? Good question. And actually, you read my mind because we're on that. That's the next question. So again, it's a big topic. I could do a whole presentation just on this, but nailing your AI content strategy, you've heard this a million times. It's not about the prompts. It's about the programming. It's about what you're putting into the AI, what you're teaching the AI before you start prompting it. The problem, I think, is that a lot of people are getting that generic, bland, that ChatGPT voice that we are all so familiar with now in LinkedIn posts. The problem is that we think we're prompting really well, but actually the programming behind it hasn't been done. And that's what the Voiceprint method does. It programs. So everything I've talked about today can be used to teach a human writer, or it can be used to teach a robot writer. It kind of works the same way. So you can make most AI copy sounds beige, bland, miles off brand. I'm sure we've all had that problem where we think we're going to save loads of time by using AI, and actually what it spits out is unusable. You may have used the word, oh, it's fine. Going back to that word fine, let's just ship it out. But actually there's a way to make your AI sound like your brand and think like a copywriter, and that is by using this Voiceprint method. So if you can use a Voiceprint for your AI, everything changes. Starts to think like your brand and write like a copywriter. So the first thing we do if we are trying to maintain a consistent brand voice is to mirror the language, as we talked about, do all that voice mining stuff first, get it all categorized and feed that into AI. So I use AI projects. I don't know how granular you want to go here with how I actually do it, but I would start a new project. We would do all this voice of customer research, and we would put all that in the files part of the project and also in the instructions part of the project. Then we do work on the values. We make sure we're incorporating all those brand values, all the brand work into the AI as well. And then the exciting bit is we teach it how to think like a copywriter. So we teach it all those amazing behavioral triggers, all that sales psychology, all the neuroscience, all the emotional triggers, everything goes in there as well, again in a file, and so you can refer to it all the time, and again in the instructions. And we teach your AI how to think like a copywriter. And I promise you, once you have a defined brand voice and all this psychology in there, you will find the output is so much better. Okay, question. What practical steps can founders take to ensure their brand voice stays consistent across website? Yeah, the practical steps are honestly defining this brand voice, defining this voice print. Like I said before, the problem is that a lot of brand voice strategies aren't brought to life. They're in a PDF, and yes, they get read, and maybe when a new starter joins who's going to be writing, you might shoot them over the PDF and they read through it. But a lot of the strategy work doesn't tell you how to apply it in the wild, in real words, but also it doesn't bring it to life in terms of, how do we actually use this? How do we actually weave it in? So it's really, the practical steps are actually to do this voice print work. So the practical step number one would be to do the voice mining, to get all that amazing customer research, to get it all categorized so you know how does my customer describe the problem I can solve in their own words. To give you an example, actually, I was working with a SaaS tech product. It was a B2B product. They did automated workflows for enterprise businesses. So the marketing team briefed me. So it was all, what we do, the major benefit is that we help reduce human error. The words human error were everywhere. It was, this is our benefit. This is what we do. Let's get writing. And I went away and did all the voice of customer research for them. So all the voice mining, which includes interviewing clients as well. So interviewing clients. And when I brought up this idea of human error, a lot of the people were kind of like, well, no, that's not true. They didn't like to talk about the human error side as a user of the product. It wasn't that they were trying to eliminate human error. They almost didn't want to admit there was human error may be an issue. So if we'd gone ahead and used the word human error in our language, and when we're talking about our benefits, it wouldn't have resonated with their customers. So it's so important to understand how they say things in order to then use it in our brand voice and reflect that back to them. So that's really important in terms of making sure that we put those mirroring techniques in. So yeah, the practical steps would be to do the voice print, which sounds like I'm trying to kind of sell my services, but I that's the only way to stay consistent. I mean, with the consistency side of things, it is about how you define, and I really feel like anchoring to brand values makes a huge difference. It's so much easier to quantify when you kind of say, okay, these are our brand values. This is how we speak as well, and we reflect our brand values in our voice. Common mistakes startups make when trying to sound unique. Yes. I would say that it's trying to, now this kind of contradicts what I said before, but when a founder first starts with the business, like I said before, the brand voice tends to sound like them. Now, what they can try and do to counteract that is go the opposite way and kind of be like, totally different. Our brand voice is totally different to who we are as people. And that can be an issue as well. So they're trying to sound too unique, but it just doesn't sit right with them. So that's why, again, I anchor it to the values, because usually if the founder has helped come up with values, and we anchor the brand voice around values, it doesn't sound way off that they just they don't feel comfortable with stuff that's going out. So common mistakes when they're trying to sound unique is going too far away from what they're comfortable with. You still do, until you're a huge enterprise business, I think there's a different philosophy then where that your brand can be a whole different person to you. But in that growth stage, you don't want to go too far the other way. So trying to sound too unique, trying to sound too different can be a really big mistake. And I think just not sounding authentic, it comes across as inauthentic. And then that again erodes the trust. So yeah, you have to still I think you can almost spot someone who's trying too hard with their brand voice a mile off. And that's why using this system really helps. So mirroring your customer's language back to them, anchoring in your brand voice, using those persuasion principles and tried and tested sales psychology techniques. You can't go wrong if you stick to that kind of method rather than going off piste and just trying too hard. Hopefully that answers that question. Let me know if you have a follow-up to it. Okay, so brand voice as your secret weapon. So as we've talked about, if your brand voice sounds fine, you're blending in. If it's inconsistent, you're confusing people. And if you use AI without defining your voice print, you're going to get beige, as we've talked about. So a voice print empathizes with customers, anchors to your values, and uses sales psychology. And that's how you can create a brand voice that grows revenue and that helps with your growth. And that's how it can be such a powerful secret weapon for your business. All right, so these are the places you can find me. I want everybody, we've got time now to answer questions, so please feel free to shoot them in the question box. I'd love to answer as many as I can, and we'll come back to the ones that I skipped over before. Hopefully some of those have been answered now, but I will come back to them. So those are the places you can find me. I don't know if we can drop those links in the chat, Luke, or whatever, so if not...
I'm sure James, who's working behind the scenes, will be able to drop them in the chat for sure. That was super interesting, Elle. And yeah, please do loop back to any of the questions. I actually have a question, if it's all right, to pose on to you. It's just literally if that's all right. Really just like having an example. Can you, an example of an early stage startup that's really kind of nailed it, like done, absolutely on point with their brand voice? Do you have an example there? And also as a sort of a follow on to that, and sort of storytelling, I find that storytelling such an impactful way of doing it. Is there ways of leveraging that as a as another tactic as well?
Early stage startup, I think there's businesses that maybe wouldn't be known as early stage now, but have done the work from the beginning. One that springs to mind is Oatly. I don't know if they're the oat milk brand. Right from the beginning. Another one actually is Who Gives a Crap, which is another poster child for brand voice. But the reason is because right from the beginning, they got nailed reflecting their customers' voice in their brand. So they do a really good job of, when you read their stuff, you're nodding along if you're a customer, if you're in the right ICP for them. So I think in terms of early stage, I mean, I could talk about clients that I work with who I think are nailing it and are in early stage, but you wouldn't know who they are. So, but I think there's more well-known businesses like Oatly, like Who Gives a Crap, who really nailed it from the beginning. So, and reading their stuff, you can really see that customer language coming out. Storytelling is a great question. And that is another really, really good reason to do the voice mining. So you get some amazing stories from those. And you can actually, when we categorize the voice of customer and the voice mining, we can create a category for storytelling. So whenever we come across a really amazing anecdote or before and after story that someone shared, we can actually create a category for that, feed that back into the AI, and they could spin a whole story around it. And storytelling is so powerful. And that voice mining side of things, like, you'll get some amazing stories from that. So yeah, that's really
definitely really and maybe a follow on out that's just come in the chat there as well, Elle. It says, how can a founder's personal story influence the brand voice without overshadowing the product? Kind of touched on that in the presentation, but it'd be nice to kind of revisit that question as well.
I'm such a big fan of using the founder story. I actually did a post last week on LinkedIn about the founder letter and the lost art of the founder letter. And I think, you know, it was a big thing a few years ago where the founder would write to the audience. It was often used in email, and I saw it used on homepages even. What's he called? Jason, the guy that 37 Signals guy who did Basecamp. Jason, what's he said? You'll know who I mean. Someone can help me out in the chat. He has a couple of other businesses, and one of his businesses, the homepage, is the founder letter, the story of why. And it's such a powerful way of connecting with the audience. So I think it can work in a lot of circumstances, particularly on email, to use that founder story. So yeah, I love using the founder story, and I don't think it can overshadow the product. Honestly, it's just a way of building connection without just talking about the benefits of the product or service. It's building that why behind what you do. So yeah, I would use it, but also, always bearing in mind that you're coming at it from the angle of what's in it for me from the customer's point of view, which is always our question whenever we're doing any copywriting. It's, okay, what does the reader care about? So your founder's letter, yes, obviously it's your passion, it's why you started your business, but you have to still reframe it. Okay, but why would that reader care about that? So yeah, you always have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
But founder story, I love them. I think they're
Definitely. Agreed, I do too. Just another question then I'll just put to you there. Someone's asked again about that kind of early stage pre-customer level business.
Right.
What are the best techniques, most effective approaches to capturing data for developing a Voiceprint when you're really early stage?
Yeah, when you don't have your own customer data, you mean? Yeah. It's identifying where your customers or clients are talking about what you do online. It could be, so quite often I'll go to competitor reviews, testimonials, product review sites. Depends what you do. I mean, if you could share what your business is, I can help as well. But if you are a product business that is on, there would be review sites for it, like Trustpilot and that kind of thing. You go on those sites and you're literally copying and pasting all the places that your ideal customer are talking about what you do as well. So it could become, it doesn't matter that you're using competitor testimonials and reviews, because you're not using them as quotes. We're not stealing people's quotes. You're stealing the words and phrases, and whether the person's describing a problem that your competitor solved for them or that you can solve for them, it's the same thing. It's the same person. So yeah, you would be going on LinkedIn. It depends if you're B2C. Facebook groups are amazing for voice of customer. People love to overshare on Facebook groups, so they're perfect. Quora, Reddit, review sites, the list, Amazon book reviews, the list goes on. So yeah, there's loads of places if you don't have your own customer data.
That's a great shout.
Yeah.
Cool. There's another lengthy question. I'll just kind of put it to you. If you have a startup limited company that doesn't have a following yet, but you have a personal brand that really does, what makes more sense to spend time on? To be more visible as a personal brand and direct customers to the new business, or focus on the new business? It's a difficult one to answer that, I suppose. But yeah, I think someone's just looking for some top tips there.
Yeah,
that is personal brand.
That is tricky. I would lean to, without knowing more about your business, of course. I would just lean towards building that personal brand. You really can't go wrong by building a personal brand. And then directing people to you're talking about your business within it. People connect with people. We know that from LinkedIn. LinkedIn personal pages get so much more response than business pages. So I would focus there and just kind of start weaving in ideas about your business. But yeah, personally, I would say personal brand. But if you want to contact me and we can talk about that, and when I know a bit more about your business, yeah, I'm happy to have a chat.
Cool. And there's another question that's just popped in. How do you balance authenticity with strategic messaging, especially when speaking to investors versus customers?
Okay. All right. So authenticity, was it?
Yeah, how do you balance authenticity with strategic messaging, especially when speaking to investors versus customers?
Okay. So just to make sure I understand what you mean, do you mean when you're using persuasion principles and the sales psychology side, being authentic there? I'll guess that's kind of what was meant.
Yes, that's coming actually. Yes to that. So.
I get that question all the time, because the minute you say the word persuasion, everyone's like, whoa, hang on, I don't want to make people do things they don't want to do. And I always say that the tool, it's a tool, and the intent behind the tool is, if your intent is good, then you're not doing anything wrong. You're not trying to make people click a button that they don't want to click and force them into a contract that they don't want to sign. You're just making sure that the right person who needs your solution sees what it is that you have. So we're not trying to make people do things they don't want to do. That's the first point. Persuasion principles, although they sound quite scary or inauthentic, they're very subtle, and there's lots of different ways. Like we've all seen overuse of scarcity and urgency, and we're kind of questioning whether that's right or not. We don't want to say things that aren't true, and that, like I said, it's a tool, and it's how you're using the tool. So the way that I always approach the Voiceprint method and actually talking about those sales psychology methods within it is, okay, who are your audience? What is your product? How do we get the right people to understand that we can solve the problem that they have, and guide them the way that they, you know, can get to the desire they want. You know, they want to solve their problem, so how can we guide them there? So the authenticity side is in the heart of the person writing, I would say, in the heart of the business. We're not, you know, if you're a business that is trying to use false scarcity, then that's you using the tool wrong. And in terms of speaking to investors as opposed to customers, that's a really interesting question, and how you adapt your brand voice for investors or customers. Most businesses come to me and say, oh, we're really tricky. We're a really difficult business because we've got more than one target audience. We've got more than one person we speak to. And I say, everybody does. You are very, very unlikely to find a business that only speaks to one person, and that's it. And they're very defined. Like, everybody tends to have a few different audiences that they're trying to communicate with and that they need to speak to. And there does need to be some adaptation there. So it comes in the strategy side. It comes in just understanding the business more. But what I would say is there's nothing wrong with adapting your brand voice to different audiences, and don't think that makes your business any more challenging than anyone else's. That comes with the territory, particularly for B2B businesses.
Great stuff. I think there's just a comment that's come in. Thank you for the session. And I suppose we're sort of coming towards the hour, Elle. So over to you just for any kind of final comments, if you'd like to conclude with anything, really.
Yeah, I think what I started today by saying is that I just, if nothing else, I want everyone to leave today understanding that there is so much more to brand voice than you first probably thought. It's so much more than a brand archetype or a tone. It can be so powerful for a business if you get it right, if you use those 3 layers that I've talked about. And if you actually bring it out of the PDF and into the real world, actually use it in your copy, it can really, really make such a huge difference to your growth. So yeah, if nothing else, I just want you to leave feeling more excited about brand voice and just knowing how it can bring in revenue for you and how it is such a powerful weapon for your business.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Elle. And yeah, lots of positive comments coming in there. So thanks once again to you. Thanks to the audience for the engagement and for posting those questions. So just before we close, I'd like to just draw your attention again to our Eagle Labs proposition, which is available at labs.uk.barclays to find out more about all the support that we offer to businesses like yours. We've just launched loads of new exciting programs, loads coming in 2026. So whatever stage of business you're at, definitely check out Eagle Labs for more free support. If you're already connected with us, reach out to us. Of course, connect with Elle on LinkedIn, myself on LinkedIn. More than happy to have a chat and connect with any one of you at any time. But yeah, I'll leave it there for the moment, and I just wish you all a pleasant rest of the day, and see you again sometime. Thanks for joining us.